The Lancasters' new home was like something out of a fairy tale. It had an antique chandelier hung in the foyer, an elaborate Victorian balcony adjacent to the master bedroom, and a garden filled with a variety of exotic flowers which even Miss Lancaster had trouble identifying. Mr. Lancaster had been in a town hall on a business meeting when the foreclosed residents came up to lot in the bank auction. As the family was in the market for a new house, with Miss Lancaster expecting a child in September, he cast a bid in for a modest $50,000. To his amazement, not a single person attending the auction that day even attempted to raise the bid, and after a few minutes, Mr. Lancaster was walking away from the auction with the deed to his new home. As the movers quickly filled the house up with the boxes and crates containing the Lancasters' personal effects, they said nothing except when handing the bill to Mr. Lancaster for their services. Even this, the head mover did in a low whisper, as if not to disturb a sleeping child. Daniel, the Lancasters' first son, bolted up the stairs to examine his new bedroom. He was 10 years old, and this would be his first bedroom all to himself. He had always had to share a bedroom with Charlie, his younger brother. Charlie was only 6, and he was constantly bugging Daniel. He wasn't so bad when they were playing video games together or when the family was watching a movie, but every night it was the same thing. "Daniel," he would always whine, "is the boogeyman gonna get me?" No matter what Daniel did, he could not compete with the night terrors of an imaginative 6-year-old. They had always been forced to sleep with the bedside lamp on, which helped Charlie, but always kept Daniel up. He was 10 years old, and what would the other kids at school say if they knew that he, Daniel Riley Lancaster, slept with a nightlight? As if on cue, he felt a tug on his shorts as he looked around the room. Charlie was looking at the far wall with a terrified look on his face. "What's that, Daniel?" Charlie asked in a whimper. Daniel looked at the wall to try and see what had caught his brother's attention, and before long it became obvious what he must have been staring at. It was a small wooden panel with thin slits between the boards, which led to a crawl space. "It's just a crawl space, doofus," Daniel said, opening his closet wide to admire how much space there was. Normally, going anywhere near a closet door made Charlie very uneasy, but he was still too busy staying as far away from possible as the crawl space door as he could to even notice where he was going. "What's it for?" Charlie asked insistently. "It's like for maintenance and stuff. Leave me alone," Daniel groaned, heading over to the windows next. And then came the sentence that Daniel had been subconsciously waiting for. "Is the boogeyman gonna get me?" Charlie asked desperately. "Yes!" Daniel finally snapped. He turned to his brother and grabbed his shoulders, turning him towards the crawl space. "That door is where he lives, and if you ever come into my room without my permission, he'll pop out and eat you." That was a very bad decision. Charlie shrieked in terror and ran downstairs crying for his mother. To add insult to injury, Daniel found himself not only grounded from video games for a week, but because Charlie was so scared, he and Daniel would be sleeping together in the other room for the night. Charlie had forgiven his big brother by dinner time, and when bedtime came, the two of them huddled together in sleeping bags, playing Go Fish, munching on popcorn, until their father came in to tell them they had to go to sleep. Daniel awoke in the middle of the night. The batteries in the camping lantern that Mr. Lancaster let them use while they waited for the power to come on had died, and the entire room was pitch black. A cloudy night kept even moonlight from shining in. Daniel looked over to where his brother should have been sleeping, but his sleeping bag was empty. A cold chill seemed to fill the entire house as Daniel looked around the room, his eyes slowly adjusting to the near-total darkness. When the light had gone out, if Charlie had been awake, he should have screamed bloody murder and awoken the entire house like he always did. There was no way, especially in a new house, that he would have gone off wandering on his own in the total darkness. Daniel heard a door creaking across the hall, and he slowly crept towards the door to his room. He opened it the tiniest bit, and saw a small figure scamper completely into what would be Daniel's room. "It's just Charlie," he kept trying to tell himself. But there was no possible way that was true. Charlie would never be that brave. "So what is it then, the boogeyman?" He shook his head in disbelief. His little brother was growing up and trying to play a prank on him. Well, it wasn't going to work. But even so, visions of the terrors that had plagued him as a 6-year-old filled his mind. Dark monsters with large fangs and glowing red eyes. He shook his head as if trying to erase the mental images he'd conjured up, and then forced himself to get up. Daniel opened the door all the way and walked out into the hall. Just before he got to the door to his room, it slammed shut in his face. "Very funny, you little dork," Daniel said, trying to sound relaxed. He opened the door up and saw the small figure standing right by the door to the crawl space, which was now wide open. "Charlie," Daniel said, "get away from there." The little figure got down on his knees and slid into the crawl space. Daniel could no longer see him, and he wasn't sure he wanted to. If this was some trick to scare him, it was working. But, he reasoned, if that was really his little brother, he could get terribly hurt in there if he didn't know what he was doing. Daniel mustered his courage and slowly approached the crawl space. But as he did, a long, slender, bony hand reached out and slammed the door to the crawl space shut. Staring between the cracks in the panels were 2 pale white eyes that seemed to glow even in the darkness. That's when he heard his brother Charlie crying. How could he have forgotten? Charlie had gotten scared just before they fell asleep and went to sleep with his parents. The white eyes disappeared from the cracks in the crawl space, and Mr. Lancaster opened the door to his room. "Daniel," he said, "what are you doing up so late, sport?" Daniel looked at his father, and then back to the crawl space. I just had a nightmare." And that's all he would ever say about that night. But he put his bed as far away from the crawl space as possible, and asked his parents if he could put his TV in front of there. "No, honey," his mother had said. "What if somebody needs to get in there?" He would never admit it, but that is exactly what he was afraid of. He was afraid that one night he would see those pale white eyes staring at him again from the cracks in the crawl space. Afraid that the bony, slender arm would drag him into the darkness. So, for the rest of the time the Lancaster spent in that house, Daniel Riley Lancaster slept with a light on. The boogeyman wasn't going to get him.